Navigating between different groups and situations seems to be second nature for people of mixed heritage. On their quest for self-identity, many have had to be flexible in order to survive. So could those adaptation skills make them better problem solvers in the future? Could they be a bridge between cultures? We take a look at that issue in the final segment of my 5-part series.
Numerous studies have shown that rigid thinking is often associated with less flexibility, less divergent thought, and less creativity. Could it be the opposite for multiracial people? After all, they've had to be versatile to navigate between identities as circumstances change. If so, could that mean they become important moderators in the future, helping to solve problems or disputes?
I do feel as though I've had the best of both worlds, and I can look at things differently because I am mixed race, and I can identify with struggles of, I feel like, anyone that feels like they're different. And that could be different because of their ethnicity, that could be different because of how they look, their skills, their abilities, anything like that.
Sometimes my parents were different or had different approaches to solve the same problem. My mom was usually a lot more outgoing and gregarious and loved meeting people, loved talking to people, whereas my dad would much prefer to sit down with a stack of papers and try and work it out himself. So I don't know if that's a cultural effect or just who they are as people, but yeah, being able to leverage their experiences and what they taught me when I was a kid growing up, that certainly has helped.
I think dealing with stressful situations or with individuals that might have a certain sort of worldview or bent, you might be able to identify with certain aspects of their culture because, again, referring back to the third culture kid, growing up, you saw both the Filipino side of you and the sort of American side of you, and it was an opportunity for me to deal with those problems or problem solve by bringing your experiences to bear.
Over the last 50 years, there haven't been many examples of multi-ethnic role models in the movies or on TV, which could be one of the reasons many biracial people say they often struggle to fit in. But that trend is slowly changing.
Today's mixed kids can look up to rappers, ballerinas, athletes, a president, and a princess.
Child psychologist Herman-Wenderoth says those of mixed heritage not only learn to read a room for nonverbal cues, but they can blend in like a chameleon.
When I was in college, it was usually whatever somebody was familiar with. So I had a friend in college who was Ethiopian. When he first met me, he thought I was Ethiopian. I've had people who were Greek who thought I was Greek. They'd say, "Oh, you look like my aunt," or Native American. So I would get, whatever someone was more familiar with in terms of race and identity, that's what they would guess that I was.
Did you gravitate toward Asians as you got older?
Not necessarily, sometimes it kind of, in a strange way, kind of depended on who I was dating.
Of course, my race, it plays a big part, but it's not the sole thing that makes up who I am, and that's important to me. It's one of those, it's like the difference between personal and social identity. Like your race is a social identity that's sort of been placed upon you, and yes, it's very important, but sometimes I want to let my personal identity shine, like my beliefs and values and everything else that makes up who I am.
Ramon Koryanov's Russian grandfather fled the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 and met his future wife in the Philippines after getting shipwrecked. Koryanov says that history has helped shape his views of the world.
You want to do Chinese?
Yeah, I don't want to do English.
Only English?
Yeah.
So if people of mixed heritage tend to think out of the box as a result of their upbringing, could they be a bridge between cultures in the future?
And even though it doesn't seem that way in the times in which we live right now, I think people will see that the current sort of backlash towards immigration and multiculturalism, that will be on the wrong side of history. So moving forward, I think people will realize that the cultural and multi ethnic viewpoint is going to be one that's embraced later on.
I'd like to believe that it's getting easier now, that it's, you're not being grouped together so much by your tribe or your race or whatever you want to call it.
I don't think that mixed race people should have to be the ambassadors to cure racism. That's not going to happen. But to the extent that people of all different kinds of experiences can share those experiences, and if other people are open to hearing them, then I think that's good.
Even though maybe I wasn't necessarily prepared for the name calling and maybe didn't understand it at the beginning, I was raised to not notice race and to only pay attention to what's on the inside of a person and how that person treats me. And that's what's most important.
Jeff Liao says he thinks as people of mixed races become more commonplace, they'll become less of a curiosity in the future.
I would guess that a lot of kids growing up now who are biracial are just going to see it as a part of everyday life and not even pause to blink and think about it.
Now, obviously, I love this series, but not just because I was featured, but because it was very interesting to hear the similarities yet the differences that the seven of us have. How did you come up with this idea?
Well, it's interesting because my children also have a bicultural background. My sons are Latino and I'm of Italian heritage as well. And I read a Psychology Today article which talked about it and some of the similarities that they found. But I'm going to tell you it was a learning experience for me when I was there, because you find out that people that were so different varying backgrounds, and yet they had such similarities. Yeah. And ironically, one friend of mine, a close friend of mine, one of the things that he used to tell me was he was born in the Ivory Coast. His mother was from the Ivory Coast. His father was white American here. When he goes home to Ivory Coast, he's considered white, and when he's here, he's black.
Yeah. Wow. Goodness. So throughout the series, you use different terms. So biracial, multicultural, mixed heritage. Why did you go back and forth between the different terms?
Well, we had such a varying degree of multi-ethnic backgrounds and of the people that were featured in this series that I interchanged a lot of them, but some people refer to themselves only as one. As you heard Jolene Ivy said, she's 100% black, even though she may be mixed. That is what she considers herself. And other people say biracial, other people say multi-ethnic. So I wanted to interchange it so you could understand the different terminology.
Right, and that was one story that really surprised me, just because I've always considered myself biracial, but I can understand why she only considers herself African American, because that's who she was raised by.
Right.
But in my home, we literally were split. So my mom had us half of the time, my dad had us the other half of the time, so we were raised by both.
So asking you a question now, when I first approached you about this, what was your initial take on it?
My initial take was, this isn't a story, only because it's just my life and it just seems normal to me. So being mixed race, it just is who I am. So I just wasn't thinking about the intricacies of it and the other stories that other people have.
And your father was watching this along with you? Tell us about the reaction.
Yes, so actually last night he was very surprised that I was called zebra and was teased at school. I guess we never shared that with him. So, but he's loved it. He's teared up and cried, and it's just been a wonderful experience. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to have done it.